Hustler, one who makes money. Real short and real simple. When you respect the game, you respect all that comes with it. Extortion, bank robbery, and hustlers. But gangster is a little bit of all. Those that take it from the ones that make it. And when it came down to making it, Flukey Stokes was that nigga, hands down, or cards up. Just depending on what side of the table you was on.
I don't even know what drugs look like. I never used them or deal. I don't even drink.
Since the early days of Chicago's gangster history, everything was built with structure. Some would argue that this was instituted by the mafia, notorious, organized, and involved in any and everything that involved money. However, because of nationalities and ethnicities, and surely racial boundaries, a black's earning potential was limited. Limited to petty crimes and drug abuse, encouraged to be subservient with sir, sent off to war only to be killed, injured, or maimed. And while America allowed the migrations of other countries' criminals, blacks sat beneath the tree and on cotton fields and watched. The picture scene were learned and imitated and instilled flash, fame, and flamboyancy, and also Flukey Stokes to be exact. The baddest motherfucker south of Mississippi. Understand Flukey was really a country nigga at heart, raised with principles, values, and integrity of a man. Not a for the time being man, but a man who believed in work, getting it, taking care of your family, and holding your own. That value system seldom seen today. Take for example rapturous names like Lucas, Barnes, Alpo, is what made him different. It made him real. Proud to be called hustler, proud to be a father, a leader, and to some, Lord. Drug lord, some might say, but nevertheless honorable. So honorable, in fact, he raised boys who stood amongst men who would fall victim to the pressures of that time. Heroin and cocaine would break the strongest of men, even though they were gangs to influence unity and neighborhood pride of that time. Organizations like Gangster Disciples, the Black Peastone Rangers, the Vice Lords, all black, all strong, but all without Flukey.
I don't even know what drugs look like. I never used them or deal. I don't even drink.
It takes a hell of a man to look you in the face and say he ain't do it, or does it. Depends on who you ask that question and where you're asking it at. Just try one of America's jails, and every prisoner would say not guilty. For various reasons, they'd likely say a lot. But then they ain't the only ones to say anything. Since the days of Flukey, there would always be two sides. What we would say and what they would say. But which side would you believe?
Willie Flukey Stokes was a chameleon of sorts. To many, he was like a Robin Hood, giving to the poor. To the police, he was nothing more than a drug-dealing gangster who would stop at nothing, even murder, to protect his empire.
Flukey Stokes' violent death was consistent with a life full of corruption, dope dealing, and murder. Flukey wanted people to believe his diamonds, cars, and cash came from Lady Luck.
I'm a gambler. I shoot pool, dice.
Maybe in the beginning, but 9 years ago, he traded in his dice and cards for cocaine and heroin. And Willie Flukey Stokes built a drug empire that left nothing to chance.
Unit 5 has learned that Flukey's drug empire was making more money than anyone ever imagined. Authorities now believe his empire was grossing $1 million a week. That's more than $50 million a year.
Confidential federal drug enforcement documents obtained by Unit 5 reveal how big Flukey's organization was. Flukey was trying to hire hitman James Allen as an enforcer to protect his drug organization. At that time, according to DEA documents, Flukey showed him 22 kilos of heroin worth more than $60 million. That was at just one stash house. Flukey had an endless supply of cocaine and heroin, and he established a drug messenger service consisting of 30 to 50 runners who could deliver his drugs anywhere in the city 24 hours a day. His runners were equipped with beepers like this one on Gordon Battle's attaché case. Unit 5 has learned that Flukey gave his runners only 2 ounces of dope at any time.
Flukey limited the amount of dope he had on the street for a number of reasons. First, he could limit his losses if any of his runners got caught by the police, and he could keep better track of his dope supply if he gave everyone the same amount. And finally, he wouldn't give anyone any more dope until they paid for the dope they already sold.
Flukey never handled the dope, he handled the money. And this man, Earl Wilson, started giving drug investigators an idea of just how much money Flukey was making and how much dope he was pushing on the streets. Wilson became an undercover operative for the police, and he documented 6 weeks of Flukey's activities. Here at 121 East 47th Street, Flukey set up office and counted his dope money, which was brought to him in gym bags, briefcases, and paper sacks. For example, Unit 5 has learned that on October 23rd, he counted as much as $200,000. On October 28th, he counted $60,000 from just one money runner, and on November 1st, 3 runners gave Flukey money. One of the bags contained $40,000. This man, Big Bill Hill, was Flukey's right-hand man. Pictured here in better days, his fingers were covered with diamonds and his hands stuffed with cash. On October 5th, 1983, he was caught with 134 packets of cocaine and heroin. Until he was put out of business, prosecutors say he alone made $100,000 a week for Flukey's organization.
The money just rolled into Big Bill from the street people, who in turn rolled it into Flukey's pockets.
8-ball side pocket. It's one of the hardest shots a pool player can take, but it was real easy for one to try and paint. The picture being painted on Flukey was one that was anything but poetic, one that defied their own description of Robin Hood. Understand, Flukey was anything but legal, but why? What would make such a principled man lead, as they say, an unscrupulous life? Whatever it was Flukey did, he did well. One thing for sure is he left a legacy of flash and celebrity-type behavior for family and offsprings, as well as for those left to recite his legendary stories.
My name's Chip. I'm Chip's son, Chip Jr. We're just doing a blueprint about everything my family was doing. You know what I'm saying? My father, my uncle, my cousins. Man, my daddy was my best friend. Like, I learned so much from him, just like, without him telling me nothing, you know what I'm saying? So, like, from what I knew from him, like, I ain't never seen him scared before, you know what I'm saying? Like, it ain't really too much people in life I ain't never seen like that. Like, somebody probably want to hear, like, about some money and nothing. No, it was just, like, just how he was. Like, people don't know, like, my daddy was real silly, you know what I'm saying? Like, he was real silly, you know, but he was only like that with people we knew, like around his kids and like around his family. Everybody else in the street would be like, oh, fuck him, you know what I'm saying, something like that, or, you know what I'm saying, he a beast, you know what I'm saying, something like that. But from what I knew from him, you know, he just taught me and my brothers how to be men, you know what I'm saying, and, like, that's all I really can say about it.
As with any hustler, life would be give and take. You would live and learn, but at home, a man would teach, and outside the home, things would be different. The man at home would be different than the man in the streets. And according to law enforcement, Gordon Battle, also known as Chip, was one of the 5 members of Flukey's organization. Sources say he, as did the other members, controlled the low end of the south side of Chicago as well as other areas. Chip allegedly had free reign during a time when gangs controlled all. Always dressed to a T, Chip and all the members would always carry signature briefcases rumored to be filled with cash. And unbelievable as that was, it was more incredible how this hustler remained untouched.
See, hustlers don't have territory, man. Hustlers get money, man. See, Chicago is real territorial. It's real gang-bang oriented, and, you know, certain niggas was getting money with certain niggas because they only could get money with certain niggas because of whatever organization they was from. But what made them so slick, they didn't claim to be a part of no organization, even though they did have gang ties, so that enabled them to get money with whoever, you know what I'm saying, like wherever, with whoever, from the richest white motherfuckers to the grimiest street motherfuckers. Didn't matter what side of town. So all that territorial shit really wasn't no territory. Niggas just had spots where they got money at, you know what I'm saying? It was just, that was basically it.
With Chicago being one of the most segregated cities in the country, having your own spot meant you had special characteristics. qualities known not to squares, but to those who could move around. There was Big Bill, Flukey's advisor and elder who could move a pair of dice as nice as the sway of a pretty woman's ass. And then there was Chip, father to Chachi and Chip Jr., the mover who would shake shit up, serious about his business, checking chumps, keeping them in line. Then there was Grass, Chip's sibling, who some say had a rivalry simply because of the closeness in age. And last but not least, Willie, as in Willie the Wimp. Small as Popeye, but strong as the scent of shit from a diarrhea-ridden dog. Together there would be an alliance none could break, and they would be bearers of their special bond. They would hail Flukey as king, and as king, there would be competition from none.
Flukey would try to eliminate his competition any way he had to. On the street, it might mean murder. In the police department, it meant bribes. On May 26, 1984, at a barbershop on the south side, Leroy Dixon was gunned down, shot in the head. He tried to move in on Flukey's drug turf. Last January on Merrill Street, Lavert Handy made the same mistake. He wanted to sell dope in Flukey's area. He ended up with a shotgun blast in the back of his head. On July 30th, in this parking lot, Anthony Brown was killed. He made the fatal mistake of robbing one of Flukey's runners and then refusing to return the money. For that, he was shot through the heart. Police say the man behind these murders was Willie Flukey Stokes. He was trying to protect his multi-million-dollar drug empire, so he simply had his competition eliminated, according to police. James Delaney is commander of Area 1.
We think he'd do anything to protect his empire. We think that he made his money dealing in drugs. We think he protected his interests any way he had to, and if it led to murder, so be it.
Flukey's criminal record spans a quarter century, arrested more than 60 times. Charges range from drug violations to murder. But since 1978, Flukey's life in crime seemed to come to a halt, even though his drug business was more profitable than ever.
Unit 5 has learned while some police officers were working hard trying to put Flukey behind bars, others were on his payroll, secretly feeding him police reports and other inside information.
It was after the funeral of Flukey's son, Willie the Wimp, that police got the surprising news. Flukey's informers penetrated the police department's detective division at Area 1. Stokes had been stopped by Las Vegas police while on a gambling junket at Caesar's Palace. He was caught with Chicago police mugshots of the suspects in his son's murder. Police tell Unit 5 it was not uncommon for Flukey to have stacks of confidential police reports.
On raids or when search warrants were executed in the past, it would not be unusual to find police reports in Flukey's possession.
Did that surprise you as a prosecutor?
Well, Flukey would have no real good reason to have police reports unless he's trying to take care of his people.
Drug investigators from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, through an undercover informant, learned that Flukey had a lot of friends on the police department. Flukey would often spot police officers on the street and tell his bodyguards not to worry because, quote, they're my friends.
Flukey suggested that if the police department had special details working late at night, he knew when they were out, where they were working, and who they were. Knowing that kind of information enabled Flukey to stay away from the police and to keep his empire operating without interference.
He attempted to pay off police officers for police reports and we believe other things. We believe he was making an attempt to own the entire Chicago Police Department.
Flukey, according to authorities and newspaper reports, was out of control. Out of order, some might say, but in his world, being out of order meant being in control. And what better thing to do than control the police? What better bullet to bust than that of a cop? That mentality was common, but the actual act was rare, as was Flukey. And although rare indeed, Flukey wouldn't be rare enough to escape the turmoil mounting. Authorities was on his back, he had open cases, and enforcing his area meant rivals had to die. A lot of shit came with the game for Flukey, but not even he was prepared for what was about to come. What was about to come would be something not to be outdone till this day in Chicago, or anywhere else for that matter. Flukey's son Willie would be killed, and with death, the world would be his stage.
What I know happened was he was on 79th at the hotel. Lil Willie always stayed at hotels. He ain't had to, but he did. Lil Willie probably was about the littlest nigga you could ever imagine, you know what I'm saying? He probably about 5'3", 100 and a buck 20, buck 25 wet, but he always kept a pistol on him. So he supposedly he had a broad up in the hotel. Some niggas ran up on him at night up at the hotel on 79th and shot him. And you know he was on life support for about a week, and they decided to take him off.
Buried in the Cadillac, had I guess about like 10 racks in his hands, you know what I'm saying? He had his jewelry on, and you know, Fluke was just like, that's how my son, like, his son was his best friend, you know what I'm saying? Like, you would hear shit in the street, like he had his son killed and all this type of shit. Nah, like, his son was his best friend, you know what I'm saying? Like, his son the one who got that thing cracking, you know what I'm saying? So, like, he wanted his son buried how he was living. So, you know what I'm saying? So, the folklore and all that just go along with it. It was just him wanting his son buried how he was living. He drove a Cadillac every day, you know what I'm saying? $10,000 in his pocket wasn't nothing, you know what I'm saying? The little jury, that's how they was living back then.
Get it how you live. A live nigga street term used today, but back then, it was incredible. A Cadillac coffin was unheard of and sent shockwaves in the underworld and in mainstream. And when life or death made that much noise, you could almost bet there would be more. Flukey had managed to get through some tough times. From a small-time gambler to a major figure was a street accomplishment that would compare to a corporate CEO. But with the death of his son, he started to change. Life for Flukey wasn't the same. Yeah, he was still associated with celebrities and athletes, but his soul was empty. And that emptiness led him to slipping. His vision was cloudy, and in the streets, a nigga needed to see. And see Flukey, someone did, with automatic weapons that would kill him and his driver. Flukey had got caught with his pants down.
Who killed Willie Flukey Stokes is still a mystery tonight, but in our portrait of a pusher, a picture is emerging about who wants to fill his shoes.
Grass and my daddy was best friends. So, like, as time was progressing, you could start seeing them branch off, you know what I'm saying? And, like, I hear stories, like, from my mama, because she always, like, used to be a talker. And she'll be, like, just telling us or talking to her friends, telling us what was going on, like, they was just getting into it. I don't know if it was money or, you know what I'm saying?
A lot of things happened, a lot of words was exchanged, you know, family members was involved. And make a long story short, on 51st and Lake Park at the Pancake House, he caught my daddy slipping, and shot him. My father died, getting rushed to the hospital.
I'm saying slowly but surely, you just saw him branching off. You was hearing stories like your daddy and Grass got into it, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can remember one time my daddy came home, his hand was fucked up. They had robbed him behind a Woolworth down here in Hyde Park. They had him back there.
At first, you know, my mother taught me and my brother and sister to forgive because he was so familiar to the family and we didn't understand a lot of the details before. But nah, he ain't raised me, he ain't support anything that we was doing. He just was around and we seen him after my father got killed. But
you know, my daddy, he always loved Grass, like even to the day he died, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I still love him, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's how you know, like, we all are separate entities. Because my brother, he, like, had business. I don't have no business, you know what I'm saying? Like, I ain't mad, you know what I'm saying? I knew how crazy my daddy was. I love him to death, you know what I'm saying? But, like, me being mad at Grass ain't finna bring my daddy back, you know what I'm saying? And can't nobody tell me about these streets, like, oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, I gotta look him in his eyes every day. And I see life kicking his ass every day, you know what I'm saying?
What doesn't kill you can only make you stronger. And Chip would never get a chance to be strong again. The strength that Flukey gave him, gone. The strength that he showed his sons, that too was gone. What was left was a legacy less the very men that built it. Jealousy played a part, as did fear. Greed also showed its face only to be mirrored in the face of others. As you see, only the names change, but as strange as it seems, the same times remain.
Unit 5 has learned exclusively that police are concerned about a possible drug war because 3 different big-time dealers would like to take over where Flukey left off. When Willie Flukey Stokes was buried, the head of the largest single independent drug operation in Chicago history was laid to rest. But the body of his drug empire is still alive and thriving and in turmoil. There appears to be 3 groups muscling for control of Flukey's $50 million a year drug network. One group is headed by Gordon Battle, Flukey's former partner, another by Chuck McFerrin, Flukey's archenemy, and the third by Sam Love Jr., Flukey's former associate. The struggle for control of Flukey's well-entrenched drug turf started, and members of Flukey's organization were brutally gunned down. Narcotics investigator Tom Shinnick.
And they're vicious and violent enough that they would protect themselves at all costs.
Unit 5 has learned that shortly before Flukey was murdered, a new cartel of independent drug dealers was formed, and he began to fear a major drug war was imminent. On November 10th at this restaurant, Flukey met with this man, Chuck McFerrin. Police theorized that McFerrin is the self-appointed leader of the new cartel. Also at that meeting, Pedro Rodriguez, a man police consider to be a major supplier of cocaine and heroin to Chicago drug dealers. Rodriguez, believed to have organized crime connections in New York, Detroit, and South Florida, may have made a pact to deal only with the new cartel. The cartel is expected to take any action to gain control of Flukey's lucrative drug empire. And the big question is, how much is Gordon Battle willing to give up? Battle, known as Chip on the street, is Flukey's heir apparent. Battle lives in a fortress-like house on the far south side of the city. He was Flukey's partner for the last few years. Another group police believe could emerge as a major source of drugs is the Love family. Police discovered evidence of the Love's big-time drug business on January 19th, when narcotics agents raided this Alsop apartment house and confiscated more than $500,000 in drug money. The cash, in mostly 10s and 20s, belongs to Sam Love Jr. The street has been relatively quiet since Flukey was murdered, but police say trouble could erupt at any time, because in the drug business, takeovers are generally not friendly. Despite extensive criminal histories, none of these men have been convicted of serious drug offenses. Unit 5 has learned that federal drug agents have been investigating the Flukey drug network for 3 years, and we have also learned that IRS was on the verge of indicting the flamboyant drug dealer for tax evasion at about the time he was killed. I don't think, Carol and Ron, that this is the last we're going to hear of the Flukey drug network.
Flukey, the reason that they didn't change half of these laws or what's going on right now, you know what I'm saying? That's the motherfucker who they start taking your tax, your money, your drug money, as soon as they arrest you, because he was buying it right back out, you know what I'm saying? They didn't understand it.
It's the greatest, man, so you got to give it to him, man, because that's the truth, and you heard it, it's real. They laid the game down, they told you what's happening, so accept this starting today. He was the boss.
All that stuff, all that paid in full shit, like all that shit, that was good shit, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, motherfuckers got killed, plenty of money was made, you know what I'm saying? And it's a big story. All that, New York shit and all that shit, it's cool for the TV, but it was real down here in Chicago, you know what I'm saying?
Legendary Flukey Stokes house, man. My uncle, you know what I'm saying? A lot of my cousins and shit, they was raised here. Top room right here, this used to be Sabrina and Lil Trigger room. You know what I'm saying? Flukey's gym room used to be in the back. It's not a big place, but you know what I'm saying? Back then, a condo like this down here on the low end, man, where all the motherfucking excitement and shit was at. This was the place to be. Like, man, we had all this shit, all these majors. We could do no wrong with that. This where the money and the flow was at. You know, Fluke kept a lot of money in there. And believe it or not, Lil Willie used to stay right next door. You know what I'm saying? In this place right here. It used to be green right here, but you know what I'm saying? They did a little something to it. You know, this is just, you know, where we came up at, man, all of us.
That's just real life, real talk. You come around here, all these niggas hustlers, you know what I'm saying? Like, you come up and down the strip, you can say whatever you want to about these niggas over here, but all us some hustlers, that's real, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't give a fuck what they do, how they do it, they get them some money.
Getting money was, is, and always will be in Blacklopedia. The story within the story that says it ain't where you from, it's where you at. And obviously these men, these stories, are all at the same place at one point in their lives. The question is sometimes different, but the answers are always the same. To get it. It's as simple and as corny as that shit they teach in school. To be or not to be. A hell of a question for those who feel they have no choice.
(1986), a cold and rainy November night on the south side of Chicago. Willie Flukey Stokes, the biggest drug dealer in the Windy City, is ambushed on 79th Street near Calumet Ave. He and his bodyguard are murdered by unknown assailants.
Flukey Stokes' violent death was consistent with a life full of corruption, dope dealing, and murder. Flukey wanted people to believe his diamonds, cars, and cash came from Lady Luck.
I'm a gambler. I shoot pool, dice.
Flukey Stokes was on the short list of most successful black gangsters, not just in Chicago history, but in American history. By 1986, he had successfully dodged several murder charges, and he dominated the Windy City's drug business. Today, Flukey's story has a fresh perspective from 30 years of new information. It's a dark and complicated story of hitmen turned informants, informants turned rapists, bodyguards turned assassins, and a drug kingpin turned into a corpse whose ghost...
Grossing $1 million a week. That's more than $50 million a year.
Confidential federal drug enforcement documents obtained by Unit 5 reveal how big Flukey's organization was. Flukey was trying to hire hitman James Allen as an enforcer to protect his drug organization. At that time, according to DEA documents, Flukey showed him 22 kilos of heroin worth more than $60 million. That was at just one stash house. Flukey had an endless supply of cocaine and heroin, and he established a drug messenger service consisting of 30 to 50 runners who could deliver his drugs anywhere in the city 24 hours a day. Flukey gave his runners only 2 ounces of dope at any time.
Flukey limited the amount of dope he had on the street for a number of reasons. First, he could limit his losses if any of his runners got caught by the police, and he could keep better track of his dope supply if he gave everyone the same amount. And finally, he wouldn't give anyone any more dope until they paid for the dope they already sold.
Flukey never handled the dope, he handled the money. Here at 121 East 47th Street, Flukey set up office and counted his dope money, which was brought to him in gym bags, briefcases, and paper sacks. For example, Unit 5 has learned that on October 23rd, he counted as much as $200,000. On October 28th, he counted $60,000 from just one money runner, and on November 1st, 3 runners gave Flukey money. One of the bags contained $40,000. This man, Big Bill Hill, was Flukey's right-hand man. Pictured here in better days, his fingers were covered with diamonds and his hands stuffed with cash. On October 5th, 1983, he was caught with 134 packets of cocaine and heroin. Until he was put out of business, prosecutors say he alone made $100,000 a week for Flukey's organization.
The money just rolled into Big Bill from the street people, who in turn rolled it into Flukey's pockets.
Flukey Stokes was arrested over 70 times, but somehow only served a single year in prison.
Charges range from drug violations to murder. But since 1978, Flukey's life in crime seemed to come to a halt, even though his drug business was more profitable.
Did that surprise you as a prosecutor?
Well, Flukey would have no real good reason to have police reports, unless he's trying to take care of his people.
Drug investigators from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, through an undercover informant, learned that Flukey had a lot of friends on the police department. Flukey would often spot police officers on the street and tell his bodyguards not to worry because, quote, "They're my friends."
Flukey suggested that if the police department had special details working late at night, he knew when they were out, where they were working, and who they were. Knowing that kind of information enabled Flukey to stay away from the police and to keep his empire operating without interference.
He attempted to pay off police officers for police reports, and we believe other things. We believe he was making an attempt to own the entire Chicago Police Department.
In 1985, he was convicted of bribery for offering police $10,000 in exchange for reports naming the sole witness in another murder case, and was free on appeal bond when he was killed.
We think he'd do anything to protect his empire. We think that he made his money dealing in drugs. We think he protected his interests any way he had to, and if it led to murder, so be it.
2 years before his own murder, Stokes was accused of having a pharmacist involved in supplying heroin cutting agents murdered. The case remained unsolved for more than a year until Daryl Moore, a convicted rapist, told detectives that he helped arrange the murder for Stokes and other drug dealers. Prosecutors thought they finally had Flukey, but their murder case against him unraveled as the only witnesses against him, a trio of self-described hitmen, recanted their testimony.
When Willie Flukey Stokes was buried, the head of the largest single independent drug operation in Chicago history was laid to rest. But the body of his drug empire is still alive and thriving and in turmoil. There appears to be three groups muscling for control of Flukey's $50 million a year drug network. One group is headed by Gordon Battle, Flukey's former partner, another by Chuck McFerrin, Flukey's archenemy, and the third by Sam Love Jr., Flukey's former associate. The struggle for control of Flukey's well-entrenched drug turf started, and members of Flukey's organization were brutally gunned down. Narcotics investigator Tom Shinnick.
And they're vicious and violent enough that they would protect themselves at all costs.
Unit 5 has learned that shortly before Flukey was murdered, a new cartel of independent drug dealers was formed, and he began to fear a major drug war was imminent. On November 10th at this restaurant, Flukey met with this man, Chuck McFerrin. Police theorize that McFerrin is the self-appointed leader of the new cartel. Also at that meeting, Pedro Rodriguez, a man police consider to be a major supplier of cocaine and heroin to Chicago drug dealers. Rodriguez, believed to have organized crime connections in New York, Detroit, and South Florida, may have made a pact to deal only with the new cartel. The cartel is expected to take any action to gain control of Flukey's lucrative drug empire. And the big question is, how much is Gordon Battle willing to give up? Battle, known as Chip on the Street, is Flukey's heir apparent. Battle lives in a fortress-like house on the far south side of the city. He was Flukey's partner for the last few years. Another group police believe could emerge as a major source of drugs is the Love family. Police discovered evidence of the Love's big-time drug business on January 19th, when narcotics agents raided this Alsop apartment house and confiscated more than $500,000 in drug money. The cash, in mostly 10s and 20s, belongs to Sam Love Jr.
Turns out that Flukey's murder was a lot more complicated than first appeared. There was more to it than merely one drug dealer bumping off another. In the beginning, the police department's chief suspect in Stokes' murder was Charles Edward Bay, co-founder of the Black Peastone Street Gang. Bay had worked for Stokes as an enforcer until late 1984, when he and others had started their own drug operation. Apparently, Bay and Flukey's business had become mutually exclusive, after at least 20 shots from an Uzi were fired at Bay and fellow gang leader Charles Highsmith in an alley behind South Michigan Avenue. In the end, it turned out that Flukey's own bodyguard, Earl Wilson, who claimed to have jumped out of his car and fired at Stokes' killers, greedily lined their pockets with Stokes' drug cash, while another set of police and prosecutors empowered snitches to run amok in exchange for increasingly dubious information about Stokes and other major drug dealers they were desperate to bring down. Maybe the crooked cops and the legitimate ones got together and cleaned house in one fell swoop. Who knows?
Stay in the car! Stay in the car! 8 killed and nearly 50 wounded. That was a recent weekend in Chicago. Homicides are up over 50% compared to last year.
Despite the dirty dealing and hard tactics employed by Chicago law enforcement against the city's so-called drug kingpins, Chicago today actually has become the center of wholesale drug shipments in the country, surpassing even Los Angeles as a staging area and transportation hub. Of course, judging from the history of the Chicago police, maybe this shouldn't come as a surprise to any sophisticated observer.
Dean, why do they want him so badly in Chicago?
Because it appears, Jim, that Chicago was Chapo Guzman's favorite town. It was the place that he located his headquarters for the transshipments of the drugs to Chicago and then to 1,000 communities nationwide and in Canada. This is also the place where his organization may well have had the most violent impact. And this is where 2 of his lieutenants in this area were arrested in the last few years and may well have turned state's evidence against him. So this would argue for Chicago being the place to prosecute him.
The epilogue of the Flukey Stokes case is the Chicago police torture scandal, which had been brewing for more than a decade and finally culminated with the conviction of John Burge, a police commander in charge of investigating violent crimes on the South Side during the age of Flukey Stokes.
I had never known what it was like to have a shotgun placed in your mouth, and you got 3 white detectives saying, "Nigga, you gonna tell me what I want to hear." And when I mumble the words no, one of them would say, "Blow that nigga's head off."
He just told me I was gonna tell you. He said, "Nigga, you gonna tell you. You can tell me what I want to know."
And after these wires were then hooked up to your handcuffs, and he asked you again about the murder, what happened?
He didn't ask me then. They put the electricity through me. I bit through. He told me I bent my back through the bag. I bit through the bag. He put another bag on top of my head, and he put the electricity to me.
Can you tell me who it was that put a plastic bag over your head?
Burge.
Early in 1982, did you participate in the electric shock and threatening with the gun and using racial epithets against a suspect by the name of Melvin Jones in Area 2?
I'll adapt my initial response as the answer.
And do you take the fifth on that?
Yes.
And did you use a black box, a similar or the same electrical device that you had used in previous occasions at Area 2 on Andrew Wilson in order to interrogate him and to get a statement from him?
I'll adapt my initial response as the answer.
And you take the fifth on that?
Yes.
I sat in a prison cell and I prayed for this day.
Former Chicago Police Lieutenant John Burge is found guilty of lying about the torture of suspects. For decades, dozens of suspects, most of them black, have accused Burge and his officers of torturing them into confessing to crimes ranging from armed robbery to murder.
Stokes is still a mystery tonight, but in our portrait of a pusher, a picture is emerging about who wants to fill his shoes.
Unit 5 has learned exclusively that police are concerned about a possible drug war because 3 different big-time dealers would like to take over where Flukey left off. When Willie Flukey Stokes was buried, the head of the largest single independent drug operation in Chicago history was laid to rest. But the body of his drug empire is still alive and thriving and in turmoil. There appears to be 3 groups muscling for control of Flukey's $50 million a year drug network. One group is headed by Gordon Battle, Flukey's former partner, another by Chuck McFerrin, Flukey's archenemy, and the third by Sam Love Jr., Flukey's former associate. The struggle for control of Flukey's well-entrenched drug turf started, and members of Flukey's organization were brutally gunned down. Narcotics investigator Tom Shinnick.
And they're vicious and violent enough that they would protect themselves at all costs.
Unit 5 has learned that shortly before Flukey was murdered, a new cartel of independent drug dealers was formed, and he began to fear a major drug war was imminent. On November 10th at this restaurant, Flukey met with this man, Chuck McFerrin. Police theorize that McFerrin is the self-appointed leader of the new cartel. Also at that meeting, Pedro Rodriguez, a man police consider to be a major supplier of cocaine and heroin to Chicago drug dealers. Rodriguez, believed to have organized crime connections in New York, Detroit, and South Florida, may have made a pact to deal only with the new cartel. The cartel is expected to take any action to gain control of Flukey's lucrative drug empire. And the big question is, how much is Gordon Battle willing to give up? Battle, known as Chip on the Street, is Flukey's heir apparent. Battle lives in a fortress-like house on the far south side of the city. He was Flukey's partner for the last few years. Another group police believe could emerge as a major source of drugs is the Love family. Police discovered evidence of the Love's big-time drug business on January 19th, when narcotics agents raided this Alsop apartment house and confiscated more than $500,000 in drug money. The cash, in mostly 10s and 20s, belongs to Sam Love Jr. The street has been relatively quiet since Flukey was murdered, but police say trouble could erupt at any time, because in the drug business, takeovers are generally not friendly. Despite extensive criminal histories, none of these men have been convicted of serious drug offenses. Unit 5 has learned that federal drug agents have been investigating the Flukey drug network for 3 years, and we have also learned that IRS was on the verge of indicting the flamboyant drug dealer for tax evasion at about the time he was killed. I don't think, Carol and Ron, that this is the last we're going to hear. Willie Flukey Stokes was a chameleon of sorts. To many, he was like a Robin Hood, giving to the poor. To the police, he was nothing more than a drug-dealing gangster who would stop at nothing, even murder, to protect his empire. Flukey Stokes' violent death was consistent with a life full of corruption, dope dealing, and murder. Flukey wanted people to believe his diamonds, cars, and cash came from Lady Luck.
I'm a gambler. I shoot pool, dice.
Maybe in the beginning, but 9 years ago, he traded in his dice and cards for cocaine and heroin. And Willie Flukey Stokes built a drug empire that left nothing to chance.
Unit 5 has learned that Flukey's drug empire was making more money than anyone ever imagined. Authorities now believe his empire was grossing $1 million a week. That's more than $50 million a year.
Confidential federal drug enforcement documents obtained by Unit 5 reveal how big Flukey's organization was. Flukey was trying to hire hitman James Allen as an enforcer to protect his drug organization. At that time, according to DEA documents, Flukey showed him 22 kilos of heroin worth more than $60 million. That was at just one stash house. Flukey had an endless supply of cocaine and heroin, and he established a drug messenger service consisting of 30 to 50 runners who could deliver his drugs anywhere in the city 24 hours a day. His runners were equipped with beepers like this one on Gordon Battle's attaché case. Unit 5 has learned that Flukey gave his runners only 2 ounces of dope at any time.
Flukey limited the amount of dope he had on the street for a number of reasons. First, he could limit his losses if any of his runners got caught by the police, and he could keep better track of his dope supply if he gave everyone the same amount. And finally, he wouldn't give anyone any more dope until they paid for the dope they already sold.
Flukey never handled the dope, he handled the money. And this man, Earl Wilson, started giving drug investigators an idea of just how much money Flukey was making and how much dope he was pushing on the streets. Wilson became an undercover operative for the police, and he documented 6 weeks of Flukey's activities. Here at 121 East 47th Street, Flukey set up office and counted his dope money, which was brought to him in gym bags, briefcases, and paper sacks. For example, Unit 5 has learned that on October 23rd, he counted as much as $200,000. On October 28th, he counted $60,000 from just one money runner, and on November 1st, 3 runners gave Flukey money. One of the bags contained $40,000. This man, Big Bill Hill, was Flukey's right-hand man. Pictured here in better days, his fingers were covered with diamonds and his hands stuffed with cash. On October 5th, 1983, he was caught with 134 packets of cocaine and heroin. Until he was put out of business, prosecutors say he alone made $100,000 a week for Flukey's organization.
The money just rolled into Big Bill from the street people, who in turn rolled it into Flukey's
Flukey would try
pockets.
to eliminate his competition any way he had to. On the street, it might mean murder. In the police department, it meant bribes. On May 26, 1984, at a barbershop on the south side, Leroy Dixon was gunned down, shot in the head. He tried to move in on Flukey's drug turf. Last January on Merrill Street, Lavert Handy made the same mistake. He wanted to sell dope in Flukey's area. He ended up with a shotgun blast in the back of his head. On July 30th, in this parking lot, Anthony Brown was killed. He made the fatal mistake of robbing one of Flukey's runners and then refusing to return the money. For that, he was shot through the heart. Police say the man behind these murders was Willie Flukey Stokes. He was trying to protect his multi-million-dollar drug empire, so he simply had his competition eliminated, according to police. James Delaney is commander of Area 1.
We think he did do anything to protect his empire. We think that he made his money dealing in drugs. We think he protected his interests any way he had to, and if it led to murder, so be it.
Flukey's criminal record spans a quarter century, arrested more than 60 times. Charges range from drug violations to murder. But since 1978, Flukey's life in crime seemed to come to a halt, even though his drug business was more profitable than ever.
Unit 5 has learned while some police officers were working hard trying to put Flukey behind bars, others were on his payroll, secretly feeding him police reports and other inside information.
It was after the funeral of Flukey's son, Willie the Wimp, that police got the surprising news. Flukey's informers penetrated the police department's detective division at Area 1. Stokes had been stopped by Las Vegas police while on a gambling junket at Caesar's Palace. He was caught with Chicago police mugshots of the suspects in his son's murder. Police tell Unit 5 it was not uncommon for Flukey to have stacks of confidential police reports.
On raids or when search warrants were executed in the past, it would not be unusual to find police reports in Flukey's possession.
Did that surprise you as a prosecutor?
Well, Flukey would have no real good reason to have police reports unless he's trying to take care of his people.
Drug investigators from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, through an undercover informant, learned that Flukey had a lot of friends on the police department. Flukey would often spot police officers on the street and tell his bodyguards not to worry because, quote, they're my friends.
Flukey suggested that if the police department had special details working late at night, he knew when they were out, where they were working, and who they were. Knowing that kind of information enabled Flukey to stay away from the police and to keep his empire operating without interference.
He attempted to pay off police officers for police reports and we believe other things. We believe he was making an attempt to own the entire Chicago Police Department.
Yo. We back. It's your boy Papa Lot. Mob ties. We on our way to Chi with it. The South Side. All my niggas from Chicago, y'all niggas get in the comment box. Y'all know what it is. Like we live around this bitch. Now today, we're gonna be covering a legend by the name of Willie Morris Stokes, but the whole world know him as Flukey. Now a little bit about Mr. Flukey Stokes. He was born in December on the 12th in 1937. And like I said and stated earlier, he's from the south side of Chicago. He's mostly known for his flamboyant lifestyle, the diamonds, the silk suits, him being a notorious gambler. It said that it wasn't nothing for him to go to Vegas and spend $250,000 on one weekend. According to the Chicago authorities, at the time of his death, he only ran the biggest narcotics distribution operation in Chicago. And that you could subtract none. That's Al Capone. That's everybody. That's shit, man. You know what's going on. But like I said, yeah, he was pretty much known as a drug trafficking kingpin, is what they allege, even though he has never been charged. He stated that he never had a drink, never touched a drug, never sniffed a drug. Now, when I think about it, he kind of somewhat reminds me of John Gotti, in a sense, because it takes a kind of dangerous ass person to stare you dead in the face or stare the camera dead in the face and say, hey, I'm not such and such and such, and you are on that shit. So he definitely had a poker face. He really came to prominence, I want to say, in 1984 when he buried his son. It was in February 1984. His son and junior, Willie the Wimp Stokes, was buried in a Cadillac-style coffin. He had $100 bills stuffed in his hand, pretty much diamond rings all in his fingers. The casket had motherfucking white wall tires. That shit had working fucking lights, turn signals and shit. It's just ridiculous. So, and not to mention, in 1985, he also threw a wedding bash for him and his wife that was covered by the Black Bible Jet magazine, where he spent $300,000 on that. According to the police, he was on his way to being indicted before his death. They was going to indict him for tax evasion, drug trafficking, and different other offenses. So pretty much by covering this story, I saw that 1984, 1985, and 1986 were pretty much the highlights and the climaxes of his life, because in 84, he ended up burying his son, Willie the Wimp, who, like I said, was a junior, said to be a big gambler, just like his dad. In 1985, he ended up throwing his 30th year wedding anniversary for his wife and in turn, he was murdered in 1986. And I guess the speculation or everything behind his murder is, I don't want to say highly speculated, but you know, it's the shit of myth. It's said that he was coming from his mistress's or his girlfriend's house, where he was set up and killed by his bodyguard. It looks like at the time of his death, it was like almost a power shift in the drugs. A new organization was in the process of being set up. So the life is just pretty much like a movie. Yeah, and it was 2 years from when he buried his son, where he was killed in November of 1986. And by all accounts, compared to his son's funeral, his was just a modest burial. But Flukey Stokes was one of the last of a dying breed. They pretty much don't have hustlers like this no more. These days, hustlers don't even live to be. He was 48 years old when he died. Hustlers don't even live almost. So if you make it past 30 without a conviction or without being killed, you can consider yourself a success in this game. So this shit just hit home on a lot of accounts, man. If y'all niggas tuned in, y'all know the road down the streets, man. This shit is not a game that you're gonna retire from. But y'all niggas make sure y'all follow me on Instagram, on Twitter. It's your boy Popalot, POP_A_LOT. We running through the city, running through the nation. We gonna be in your city soon, I promise. And y'all niggas tap in, man. Y'all hit the comment box. Y'all hit me on my direct messages. Y'all get under the pictures. And we be back with more Trails Real Spill. Mob, ties.
Cold, rainy November night in 1986 on Chicago's South Side. The streets were quiet, but Willie Flukey Stokes, one of the most infamous drug kingpins in the city's history, was about to make his last move. Fresh off catching a flick at the movies, Flukey and his girlfriend made a routine stop at an all-night convenience store on 79th and Calumet. He'd been there before, plenty of times. It was just another night, or at least that's how it seemed. Flukey wasn't alone. He rolled up deep, as always. 2 cars pulled up, his bodyguard in one, Flukey his lady, and his driver in the other. The security detail did their usual sweep, checking the aisles for any threats before their boss even stepped inside. Popcorn, bottled water, the last things Flukey Stokes ever bought. After leaving the store, they headed home, but death was waiting. As soon as the Cadillac pulled up to his girlfriend's house, 2 gunmen sprang from the shadows. They came ready, one with a machine gun, the other with a pistol, and they let it rip. The bullets tore through Flukey and his driver before they even had a chance to react. His girlfriend, untouched, sat frozen in shock. The 2 gunmen were waiting, crouched down between parked cars on either side of the street, said Police Captain Joseph Curtin. When the Cadillac stopped, out they popped and started blasting away. The killers fled south on foot, heading toward 80th Street, where a silver van was waiting with a 3rd man behind the wheel. But Flukey's bodyguard, Earl Wilson, wasn't going out like that. He jumped out of a trailing white Cadillac, Magnum .357 in hand, and fired off shots at the assassins. The rain washed away any trace of blood. No one knew if Wilson's shots hit their mark or if the killers made it out clean. When police arrived, Flukey was still holding his portable telephone. Investigators later found that the base unit was inside his girlfriend's house, meaning he had been making his usual call before stepping inside, his final routine. Flukey's murder wasn't random. He had enemies, a lot of them. Word on the street was that he had financed a failed hit on one of his biggest rivals, a leader of one of Chicago's deadliest street gangs. That man had survived and vowed revenge. Flukey was no ordinary drug dealer. He was one of the most successful black gangsters in American history, dominating Chicago's South Side drug trade from the late 70s into the mid-80s. He was old school, coming up in the 1950s, long before the crack era turned the streets into a free-for-all of teenage shooters and reckless violence. And if his flair for the dramatic wasn't enough proof, just look at how he buried his son. When Willie the Wimp was killed in 1984, Flukey sent him off in style. A custom Cadillac coffin, a funeral so over the top that Stevie Ray Vaughan turned it into a song. But despite his reputation as a Robin Hood figure, known for helping struggling families, handing out cash, and looking out for the neighborhood, Flukey wasn't untouchable. At the time of his murder, federal agents were closing in, 2 years deep into an investigation. Within a couple of months, he was going to be indicted on racketeering, tax violations, and running a criminal enterprise. According to a federal agent involved in the case, what he would have been looking at was life in prison. But the streets got to him first. After his death, Flukey t-shirts sold like crazy on the South Side, proof that his name would live on. But the real story? It wasn't just about Flukey. It was about the system that let him thrive. The Chicago police, the Cook County prosecutors, they all knew who he was. They watched him move weight, watched the bodies pile up, watched him get richer by the day. And yet he ran the South Side for decades. The Fed said Flukey Stokes had the whole block on lock, running 20 to 40 dope houses, slinging heroin and cocaine nonstop, 24/7. Each spot brought in anywhere from $20K to $60K a week, with up to 200 people working under him at any given time. James Allen, a hitman who later snitched on Flukey for a murder-for-hire plot, once said he saw 24,000 $10 bags of dope sitting right in front of him. Flukey stayed flying back and forth to Vegas, where his diamonds and flashy fits made him the center of attention. He'd hit the craps tables and start handing out $100 bills to randoms he thought brought him luck, said his longtime lawyer, Joseph Ettinger. Casino records showed he could run through $1 million in just a few weeks. Right before he got clipped, Vegas cops caught him holding classified police files on the suspects in his son's murder. After beating a murder conspiracy charge, a reporter asked if he was guilty of all the dirt on his name. "Do I look like that?" Flukey grinned as he walked out of court. Despite his rep, folks who dealt with him always said the same thing: Flukey was a gentleman. For his 30th wedding anniversary, he threw a $200K party and passed out $100 bills like it was nothing. On the South Side, he'd do the same, handing out cash while pumping the same streets full of dope. Allen told a story about Flukey spotting a family getting evicted. Without a second thought, he hopped out the car, peeled off a thick wad of cash, and paid their rent in full, plus a year in advance. His mindset was simple, Allen said. The game was the game, and he was going to eat. But he wasn't about to corrupt what was still pure. The cops saw him different. A vampire, one investigator said. What else but a vampire stays up all night and sleeps all day? They called him Super Dude, but Flukey rocked with his own name. By the time he got hit in '86, the street said he was making $1 million a week and starting to clean up his money. He was backing a jazz album, trying to buy a recording studio, and managing a prize fighter. His lifestyle screamed money. 3 1986 Cadillacs with vanity plates, Flukey 1, Flukey 2, and Flukey 3. But the night he got clipped, he was rolling in a limo owned by his right-hand man, William Big Bill Hill, a heavyweight in the dope game, moving $100K a week. Hours before he was supposed to get sentenced on drug charges, Hill got snatched up for questioning about Flukey's murder. When he finally saw the judge the next day, they hit him with 20 years. "You've been a fast buck artist all your life," the judge told him. "Your time is up." Flukey was straight out of the Superfly era, diamond cluster rings big as silver dollars, gold bracelets stacked on his wrists, a diamond-encrusted watch, and a thick chain with an iced-out F hanging off his neck. But when his body hit the morgue, he wasn't dressed for the show. A Cook County examiner said he pulled up wearing blue sweatpants, a red leather jacket, a Michigan t-shirt, and a black cap. Cook County State's Attorney Richard M. Daley wasn't trying to hear none of the legend talk. "Stokes has been a drug dealer for years. He's destroyed lives. Just because he drove a big car and wore funny clothes doesn't make him a folk hero." Who killed Flukey Stokes? The setup might have started in September '86 when Flukey put out a hit on gang bosses Charles Edward Bay and Charles Hightower. "It appears to be an assassination attempt," said Sergeant Calvin Giles, stating the obvious. Bay and Hightower used to be Flukey's muscle, but they broke off and started their own thing in '84. "It's a straight-up dope war," a Chicago cop said. Flukey was heated at Bay and put $50K on his head. At the same time, word on the street was Flukey had his own name on somebody's list. After Flukey and his driver got sprayed up, gang crimes detectives raided the crib of Charles McFerrin, a former Flukey affiliate now linked to Bay. Inside, they found a 9mm submachine gun with a silencer, 3 other burners, and $46K in cash. McFerrin got booked for illegal gun possession. Next up on the Fed's hit list was McFerrin's stash spot in Calumet City, where they ran up and snatched $167K worth of cocaine and another 9mm submachine gun with a silencer. Inside was Pedro Rodriguez, 51, posted up with his 2 sons, George Rodriguez, 25, and John Diaz, 22, straight out of Huntington Park, Cali. All 3 got bagged on gun and drug charges. Word on the street was Stokes, McFerrin, and some of the other major black dealers had sat down with Rodriguez not too long before that. Dude was a heavyweight in the game, so big that when he decided to only serve Flukey's rivals, it sent shockwaves through Chicago's underworld. That power shift had Flukey's name on the chopping block, and when he got taken out, McFerrin, Bay, and Highsmith slid right into position as the new kings of the South Side. The cops locked in on their prime suspect, Charles Edward Bay. But Bay wasn't just some street boss. He was deep in the Moorish Science Temple, an old-school black religious group dating back to the early 1900s. Before that, Bay co-founded the Black P Stones in the 60s alongside Jeff Fort, a certified menace now serving triple digits behind the wall for plotting terrorist moves with Libyan agents. By 76, the P Stones flipped their whole identity, rebranding as the El Rukns and rolling with the Moorish Science Temple's teachings. They rocked red fez hats and pushed that sovereign state talk, basically claiming they weren't bound by U.S. laws. That meant no driver's licenses, no official paperwork, and definitely no regard for the system. By 86, El Rukn and Chicago's biggest black gangs were knee-deep in the dope game. Instead of just selling, they were taxing every dealer moving weight in their hoods, Flukey included. But things went left real quick. Bay and Flukey's business started clashing after Bay and William Highsmith got lit up in an alley off South Michigan Ave, at least 20 shots sprayed from an Uzi. Bay had been in the mix for years, running up a record that stretched back to the late 60s. He first got hit with a fraud charge for embezzling federal money, millions meant for urban redevelopment that he and Fort funneled straight into their own pockets. He was supposed to do 4 years, but finessed his way down to probation. Then in '71, Bay and 6 other Stones skated on murder charges for the 1970 killing of Chicago detective James Alfano, a gang intelligence officer who got ambushed in a South Side alley. The acquittal set the city on fire. Sniper attacks on cops started popping off, and months later, Cesare Marsh, a black P Stone who was supposed to testify, got found dead in March '71. Stokes had been deep in the dope game since the late 50s, and by '78, police had him pegged as one of the biggest, if not the biggest, suppliers in Chicago. Fast forward to February '84, and tragedy struck. His son, Willie the Wimp, got gunned down at a Southside hotel. 2 years later, Flukey still threw down at that same hotel, dropping $200K on a wedding anniversary party like it was nothing. But it was Willie's wake that really made headlines. Dude was propped up in his casket like he was still pushing whips, hands on a steering wheel, gripping $1,000 bills. The whole setup was wild. Blinking headlights, white wall tires, a Cadillac grill, and vanity plates reading Wimp. Despite his reputation, Stokes had some serious pull in the city. On November 10, 1986, over 300 people packed a Southside lounge to honor him for his outstanding community service. Meanwhile, his rap sheet was looking just as heavy. Nearly 70 arrests, but somehow, he only did a single year in Cali on drug charges. The word in the streets? Flukey had some real friends in the Chicago PD. By '85, the feds finally caught him slipping. He got popped for bribery after trying to slide the cops $10K to get the name of a witness in a murder case. That move set off a whole FBI sting. Over the next 2 years, Wentworth District Commander Marjorie Johnson played the role of a protection racket boss, while Officer Cynthia White moved like his courier. Between '86 and '88, dirty cops raked in over $160K in bribes, letting gambling spots and drug operations run smooth. When the hammer dropped, 18 gambling bosses and 3 alleged dope pushers, Flukey included, got hit with indictments. One of the wildest revelations? Army and Lou's, a legendary soul food spot on 75th and Vernon, where even Mayor Harold Washington used to grab a plate, was one of Flukey's collection hubs. Officer White testified how she sat there watching him run business right out the booth. 2 passed him money, thick stacks. 3 more handed him envelopes, she recalled. Then she said he stuffed the cash into a briefcase like it was just another day at the office. Her testimony painted a picture of corruption so deep that even the hustlers were complaining about cops pressing them for bribes. At one point, she even broke down crying, realizing an officer she once trusted was out here shaking down criminals for cash. Flukey ended up convicted of bribing a cop and got sentenced to 3 years. But he wasn't sitting behind bars when karma came knocking. He was out on a $75K appeal bond when they finally got him. 2 years before Flukey got murked, he just barely dodged a murder charge for the hit on Robert Sorowski, a 61-year-old pharmacist who got laid down right outside his Hyde Park crib on August 1st, 1984. That case sat cold for a minute till Daryl Moore, who already had a rap sheet, decided to start talking. He told detectives he helped set up the murder for Flukey and some other hustlers. By February 1986, Flukey caught an indictment, but it all fell apart quick. Witnesses started switching up, backing out, and acting like they ain't know nothing. The three hitters, who supposedly got hired to do the job, first said Flukey called the shot because Sorowski stopped selling the heroin cut they needed to keep their business booming. But when the heat got real, they flipped their story. Flukey, Harry Scott, and Prentice King were accused of dropping $10K to James Allen, Franklin Freeman, and Henry Griffin, the three shooters. Griffin was already on death row for another drug hit, a case that also tied back to Moore and Allen. Freeman even wrote a letter to Flukey's lawyer, straight up saying, "I can't keep playing along with this setup on your boy Willie Stokes. Truth is, I don't even know who killed Sorowski." Allen doubled down, writing that police and prosecutors had him lying to pin the whole thing on Flukey. Allen was already looking at life for another hit, and the way he told it, detectives let him know plain and simple: play ball and blame Flukey, or end up on death row. But once Freeman, Allen, and Moore all backtracked, Flukey's high-priced lawyers went to work. The case crumbled, and Flukey walked right out the courtroom into a waiting caddy, telling reporters he was headed to Vegas to shoot some dice. But for Freeman and Allen, not so easy. They already went in front of the grand jury and put themselves in the mix with Griffin, so now they had to eat those words. Prosecutors argued innocent men don't confess to contract killings, but defense lawyers flipped it, saying these dudes had plenty of reasons to fold under pressure. One of the public defenders made it real clear. This was all about bringing down the flashiest alleged dope kingpin on the South Side. That was the prize. And if that wasn't messy enough, Allen even tried to blackmail Flukey and Scott, writing them from the pen. "If y'all don't cough up $10K each, you going down. State already offering me a deal to turn witness." He made sure they knew he wasn't bluffing. "Right now, you might think I'm playing, but when y'all get snatched up for Sorowski's murder, you'll see." As for Griffin and Allen, they've been locked up since '86. Griffin's death sentence got flipped to life in the '90s, but he kept fighting to get his conviction overturned. His case exposed another grim piece of Chicago's underworld, a contract hit over a $3 million a year drug operation called Operation Camelot. Griffin had taken a $2,500 deal, some cash, some coke, to take out a dude named Carl Gibson, who was running a dope spot at 47th in Indiana. But when his boss, Charles Ashley, got it in his head that Gibson was a snitch, it was a wrap. On June 21st, 1984, Gibson's body got dumped near the 73rd Street exit off the Skyway, 4 slugs to the head. Same detective from the Stokes case, Pachordo, were on it. Moore, playing informant again, came through with receipts. Griffin and Allen got scooped up, and Griffin's own confession sealed his fate. He admitted Moore gave him the .38. Then he and Allen played it smooth, dropped Griffin's family off, got back in the car with Gibson, and set off on the Skyway. Allen drove, Gibson in the front, Griffin in the back. They flipped direction at a toll plaza, and as they cruised north, Griffin put 4 in Gibson's head. They dumped the body, got rid of the car, and the next day, Griffin handed off the burner to Ashley. But that wasn't enough to save him. Court papers laid it all out, a raw look at just how deep the game ran in '80s Chicago, where a man's life was worth a few grand and a brick, and snitches weren't the only ones getting crossed. Daryl Moore and Detective Pachordo had a history that damn near sounded like a movie script, except it was real life. Moore wasn't just any informant. He had snitched in 10 homicide cases before, with 6 of them leading to murder convictions, and that ain't even counting the case against Flukey Stokes. By October '87, Chicago Lawyer magazine even ran a whole piece on him called Profile of a Snitch. One prosecutor put it plain as day. For money, Mr. Moore either beats people, maims them, or if need be, he will kill them for the right price. Yet somehow, Daley's office still cut a deal with this self-proclaimed hitman. In exchange for testifying about a contract murder, Moore got straight-up cash, a whole business set up in his name, and a get-out-of-jail-free card for his weapons and drug charges. On top of that, he wasn't even charged for a hit he admitted to being involved in. Instead of rotting behind bars, dude was out here roaming Chi-Town streets like it was nothing. Moore was such a grimy character that even his own mother testified against him. When asked if her son had a reputation for honesty, she didn't sugarcoat it. Bad. Would she believe him under oath? No, I wouldn't. At the time Daley's office let Moore walk, he was staring down a serious bid as a habitual offender with priors for rape and armed robbery. But luck was on his side. He had spent the early '80s as an enforcer for Southside kingpin Charles Ashley. Ashley, Paranoid that his worker Carl Gibson was snitching, allegedly hired two shooters, James Allen and Henry Griffin, to take him out. The case against Ashley was weak, though. By the time he was convicted, he was already dying of cancer, sitting in a wheelchair. The two alleged hitmen got found guilty too, but when they appealed in '86, Moore switched up the whole story. In a videotaped statement, he claimed the state paid him to lie and set up Ashley, who the cops had been gunning for. Said he didn't know a thing about Gibson's murder, but back in '84, while sitting in a jail cell, Moore hit up Detective Picordo with a classic, "I can do something for you if you can do something for me." He told Picordo that Ashley wanted Gibson gone, thinking he was working with the law. And just like that, another name got chalked up as a casualty of the game. Carl Gibson is no legend, no kingpin. His whole existence got boiled down to the victim line in an old murder file. He was just a runner for Ashley's operation, the dude taking money from customers and slipping it through a slot in an apartment building where the product got handed back. The dope game might look flashy in movies and rap songs, but Gibson's reality was cold. He worked 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, for $5 a day, a spot to lay his head, and just enough heroin to keep him functional. 1 bag in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, 1 at night. Between January and June of '84, the police made undercover buys from him. By June 14th, the whole operation got raided. Ashley and Gibson both caught charges for selling heroin. But Gibson's fate was sealed when Ashley noticed something off. The cops weren't hassling Gibson like they did everyone else. To Ashley, that smelled like snitch behavior. According to Moore, Ashley put a price on Gibson's head. Moore claimed he was the first pick, but they couldn't agree on a number. He started at 10 racks, dropped it to 5, but Ashley wasn't trying to pay that. Instead, Moore plugged in Griffin, who was down to do the job for $2,300 and 3 ounces of coke. On June 20th, Gibson rode out with Griffin and Allen, thinking they were making a move to cop quinine for cutting the dope. Allen drove, Gibson sat shotgun, and Griffin sat behind him, gripping a fresh burner. As they hit the Skyway and made a U-turn at the toll plaza, Griffin upped the piece and put 4 in the back of Gibson's head. And off that alone, all 3 were convicted. Griffin got the death penalty, Ashley and Allen got life. During cross-examination, Moore threw out even more dirt, claiming Ashley had hired him back in '80 to kill a prostitute named Deborah Bradley because she was suspected of snitching. He also said he and Griffin once agreed to take out Ashley's own brother, but never got around to it. Moore was straight up reckless. He physically grabbed defense lawyer Roberta Samotny in a courthouse hallway for reasons nobody knew. She managed to get away. Later, he accused Samotny and another lawyer, Sam Adam, of trying to bribe him to change his testimony. The prosecutors strapped a wire on Moore, hoping to catch something, but after 3 days, he got nothing. One former prosecutor tried to justify cutting deals with killers. If you're dealing with a hit involving narcotics dealers, you're not flipping a choir boy. But let's be real, was it worth it? Case in point, what happened after Ashley's conviction? On February 13th, 1987, Moore crossed paths with an 11-year-old girl heading to the store in Uptown. He asked for a match, then snatched her up when she tried to leave. When she started crying, he flashed a gun and told her to shut up or he'd blow her head off. Then he dragged her into an alley and did the unthinkable to her. Sam Adam, Ashley's lawyer, put the blame squarely on Richard Daley. Morally, he's just as guilty as Daryl Moore, maybe worse, because unlike Moore, he's supposed to be a decent man. But prosecutors stayed defending their move. "We didn't know what he was going to do after the case," said Assistant State's Attorney Lawrence Victorson. "He was the only one who could give us what we needed on Ashley." Assistant State's Attorney William Railing doubled down. "Sometimes, you gotta make tough decisions and pray they're right. I still believe we made the right call. If you can't prosecute contract killers and drug dealers, what are you even doing?" Henry Griffin wasn't done fighting, though. In 1989, he filed a post-conviction petition claiming the state's attorney's office knew Moore was lying. According to the petition, Moore got $25,000 from the state to fake his testimony, plus a luxury stay at the Holodome Hotel, all expenses covered, and a catering truck to run his own business. And then, in yet another Cook County murder trial in 1987, Moore did it again. He got on the stand and admitted he had lied in Griffin's case and that the state's attorney's office paid him to do it. The whole case was dirty from top to bottom, and at the end of it all, the only real winner was Daryl Moore. The psychiatric report on Daryl Moore sounded like a sad hood novel. Daryl Moore grew up in a packed household, one of 6 or 7 kids, the second youngest. Pops had a solid gig as a factory molder, but by the time Daryl hit 8, teachers already pegged him as a slow learner with signs of ADD. Life took a turn when he was 12. His pops got laid off after 27 years when the plant shut down. The fam had to move to rougher hoods, and his father drowned his sorrows in the bottle, turning into a full-time drunk who lashed out at his kids. Social records from '62 say moms would dip out the crib sometimes just to escape the madness. Daryl even roamed the city, hopping buses and trains, pulling up at random stops just to track her down. By 13, he was drinking and messing with drugs. By 14, still stuck in the 6th grade, he said forget school and dropped out. The system wasn't letting that slide, so truancy laws sent him to a special school. But he wasn't trying to be locked down. He kept running off and ended up in the Audi Juvenile Detention Center. While inside, he tried ending it all by jumping through a glass window. The records show more self-harm attempts, even trying to blind himself. He was eventually sent to Kankakee State Hospital, where he made another break for it. Doctors slapped him with all kinds of diagnoses: schizophrenic reaction, chronic undifferentiated type, with suicidal tendencies, and borderline and schizotypal personality. He wasn't the only one. His little sis also ended up in psych wards. By 17, the drugs weren't just a habit. They were his way of numbing the demons in his head. But for all the mess in his life, one thing was clear. Daryl held his people down. Family said he was always willing to help and did what he could to support them. Problem was, that kind of testimony ain't worth much in court. The prosecution made sure to twist it into, yeah, he might be good to his folks, but if you ain't blood, you better watch your back. Now here's where it gets grimy. The judge laid it all out. From August 1984 to June 20th, 1986, the state's attorney's office dropped over $66,000 on Moore and his people. Most of that bag came after he testified against Griffin, $7K before, the rest after. Moore hit the stand at a federal hearing and basically told on himself. He bragged about being a big-time dope dealer who decided when to tell the truth and when to lie. He swore petitioner was innocent and that he straight up lied on the stand at trial. The whole witness relocation money, that was just a cover. The state paid for his testimony. The assistant state's attorneys swore up and down that the money was for relocation and that they truly believed Moore was in danger. Detective Picciotto? He cut Moore a $200 check but claimed that's all he ever gave him. The cops and prosecutors all stood firm that they believed Moore told the truth in court. But when Moore took the stand later, he was tight. He wasn't just mad, he flat out said, "I despise them." Even petitioner's lawyer wasn't trying to defend Moore's credibility. We believe that Moore is a pathological liar. Moore wasn't just mad about snitching. He was salty that the prosecutors left him hanging. Before testifying, he caught a major case and thought they'd come through for him. They didn't. Now he's rotting away on a 60-year bid for aggravated criminal assault of a disgusting nature. He knows he's probably dying in prison, and that betrayal by the state still burns him up. Maybe that's why he flipped on his testimony, maybe not. But it's clear why he went off at the hearing. The prosecutors and Picciotto stuck to their guns, saying Moore was telling the truth at trial. But that's where the judge started questioning things. Pure heart, empty head, only goes so far when it comes to cops and prosecutors following the Constitution. Then there's Franklin Freeman. Freeman's name came up after petitioner's trial. In another case, prosecutors wanted him to snitch. So Detective Picciotto brought Moore to Winnebago County Jail to convince him. Freeman said Moore was running game, telling him to fake it, play along, and he'd get charges dropped. Moore bragged about getting stacks and still being able to move weight in Chicago because Picciotto had him covered. Freeman admitted he went along with it, feeding the grand jury lies because his own charges weren't cleared yet. But 3 days later, he recanted everything. The judge wasn't buying Freeman's story either, though. The only thing I do credit is that he was trying to play the system to help himself. Still, the prosecution knew what they were doing, even if they thought he was lying. Putting him on the stand locked him into a story under oath. At the end of the day, they never even used Freeman as a witness. Instead, they switched up and charged him as a suspect. But guess what? Freeman took it to trial and walked. When the jury came back with that, not guilty, Freeman had just 5 words. Thank God the jury understood. Reading legal breakdowns like this is like stepping through the looking glass into a world of half-truths, quarter-truths, and straight-up lies. With all the deception in the mix, how's a judge even supposed to pin down the truth? Henry Griffin and James Allen got their appeals denied, even though their convictions were damn near built on Daryl Moore's shaky-ass testimony. They still locked up today. And the judge? He basically brushed off the whole pay-for-play situation with Moore's testimony, saying, the key issue here ain't whether Moore himself or his expenses were covered. That much is clear. It ain't even about when the payments hit. The real question is whether there was a deal to pay more for snitching. If there was, then making the payments after the fact don't make it any less dirty. Just makes it a smarter move with a dude like Moore. And yeah, some of that money was for a different case handled by another unit, but at the end of the day, it's about the purpose of those payments. Was it to get Moore to testify against Griffin? If so, that should have been disclosed. Now, if the money was just to keep him safe from retaliation, that's a different convo. Either way, a jury got a right to know if a witness is only talking because he got a check cut. James Allen, the other alleged hitman, already had a rep as a dangerous dude. Back in '70, he got hit with a murder charge for killing a cop. He even admitted he rolled out with 2 other guys to jack an armored truck in '69. But when the boys in blue tried to stop them, they let off shots and Officer Oliver Singleton got killed. After that, the cops went wild, lit up their car with 300 shots. Allen was the only one who made it out alive. He got slapped with 100 to 200 years, but ended up back on the streets in '83. When he later begged for mercy, the prosecutor shut that all the way down. The man you are looking at is a contract killer. He took out a so-called friend for nothing more than $1,500 in cash and $1,000 worth of cocaine. He already proved he'll drop anybody, anytime, as long as the price is right. He doesn't deserve any kind of mercy. After running through all these grimy stories about hitmen, dirty cops, and slick prosecutors who, let's be real, walked the same South Side streets Flukey Stokes had flooded with dope, let's circle back to how Flukey himself got taken out. Turns out, his murder wasn't just another case of a dope boy getting knocked off by a rival. It was deeper than that. His bodyguard, Earl Wilson, the same dude who supposedly hopped out the car and shot at Flukey's killers, ended up getting booked on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of armed robbery. Why? Because he was the one who lined Flukey up that night in '86. But how it all came to light was some movie-type-ish. Some dude in Hyde Park had his police scanner on and caught something wild, a voice calling out locations. Later, that same voice was telling someone, "Make sure you got 2 bodyguards next time." Even crazier, the voice told his people, "Don't run, walk," away from the scene. Next morning, this mystery man calls up a radio station and the cops with the intel, but he never dropped his name and still ain't been identified to this day. Wilson's lawyer wasn't buying the whole random radio listener angle, though. He straight up said, "What regular citizen got equipment like that?" Tried to argue that it was some illegal wiretapping situation and shouldn't be used in court. But Judge Ronald Himmel shut that down too, basically saying, "Bruh, we talking about radio waves out in the open. Ain't no expectation of privacy with that." After pressing Wilson, he admitted he helped set up a robbery, but swore he ain't know they was gonna kill Flukey. Then police shifted their focus to a biker gang member they had on a warrant for stealing a radio phone. Word was, this dude snatched the phone from a South Michigan Avenue store and handed it off to Wilson, so he could keep tabs on Flukey's movements. The real reason behind the hit? Money and revenge. Investigators believe Taylor wasn't just looking to rob Flukey for his flashy jewelry and stacks of cash. He was trying to collect a $50K bounty put on Flukey's head by gang boss Charles Edward Bay. Bay wanted payback after Flukey had him shot up, so he supposedly put out the bag for anyone willing to do the job. By the time Flukey got hit, Bay was already on the run for another murder. But in the end, Taylor never got charged for Flukey's death, and Bay never got convicted for any murders. Ain't nothing wilder than finding out Flukey Stokes' right-hand man, the dude he trusted with his life, was out here lining him up for the grave. But what really had folks' jaws on the floor during Wilson's trial? The fact that this man had been feeding the cops intel on Stokes' operation for months, while plotting his murder at the same damn time. Straight Judas moves. At his sentencing, Wilson's lawyer, Robert Edwards, tried to play the sympathy card, saying Wilson had been putting in work for the state, risking his life as an informant even while running with Flukey. He put himself on the line, his lawyer pleaded. But the judge wasn't trying to hear none of that. Judge Ronald Himmel hit him with life, no parole. Dude wasn't walking free ever again. Prosecutors claimed Wilson set it all up so he could crown himself the new kingpin of the South Side. Funny thing is, none of his alleged co-conspirators ever caught a charge. After the verdict, Flukey's brother Curtis kept it simple. "The court was fair," he said, "but it won't bring my brother back." Even in death, Flukey was still causing chaos in the streets. His name popped up heavy in the trial of Laurel Bay, brother of Charles Bay, the main suspect in Flukey's hit. Bay's lawyer, Charles Murphy, wasn't holding back, saying Flukey masterminded a setup before he got clipped. Murphy swore up and down that Stokes planted evidence, a beer can with Bay's prints, at the murder scene. One of Flukey's self-proclaimed steady girlfriends backed the theory, saying she grabbed beer cans off Bay's mother-in-law's porch just like Flukey told her to. Then somehow one of those cans magically ended up at a Southside bar where two men, Robert Seward and Donald Hayward, got gunned down. Prosecutors weren't buying it, calling the whole setup story a fairy tale. They pointed out that cops hit the scene just a minute or two after shots rang out. No way Flukey had time to stage a frame-up and dip. Plus, they said, unless Stokes was some kind of fingerprint wizard, it'd be impossible to pull off. Murphy kept pushing the angle that Stokes, who ran the Southside drug game till his own murder in '86, set up Hayward and Seward for the grave after they botched an attempted hit on James Highsmith and Charles Bay. And here's the kicker. Some of the key witnesses, including one victim's wife, flipped their stories, admitting they got it wrong when they first ID'd Bay as the shooter. It took a great deal of courage for her to do what she did, the prosecutor said, after they paid her rent for 2 months and located her. And just like that, even with Flukey 6 feet deep, his people were still out here, moving and shaking in Chicago like the game never stopped. Jump to 2011, and Flukey's old protege-turned-rival Charles Edward Bay checked out from natural causes. His death had Chicago buzzing for days. Bay was that deep in the Southside's underground economy. Over 700 folks pulled up to an Englewood church to pay their respects, remembering a man who, in his later years, was all about redemption. Edward was real about not wanting to see the youngins out here making the same mistakes he did, said his longtime friend Larry Jamil Mays. That funeral at St. Andrew's Temple? It was like a summit for Chicago's black gang royalty. You had folks from the family of Jeff Fort, the El Ruckin boss who, alongside Bay, helped start the Blackstone Rangers back in the 60s. Both were part of the Maine 21, the top dogs running the Rangers. Even their sworn enemies, the Disciples, showed up, along with Vice Lords, another crew that used to clash with the Disciples. Assistant U.S. Attorney William Hogan, who went after the El Ruckins in the 90s, put it plain, "I didn't think anything short of a stake through his heart would have killed him. He was that tough. Everybody was afraid of him." Among the mourners was James Highsmith, who got hit 4 times alongside Bay in that infamous '86 ambush. He couldn't stand seeing our youth getting wiped out in these streets. He tried to use his influence to change minds, to get them thinking different, Highsmith said. As they closed Bay's coffin, Highsmith added, "Edward felt he had a story to tell." And just like that, another dark and complex chapter in Chicago history came to an end. Turns out, James Highsmith wasn't just another face in the crowd at Bay's funeral. He was the same cat who got lit up alongside him back in '86, likely on Flukey's orders. But after Stokes got clipped, Highsmith flipped the script and bossed up, making front-page news in '87 when he got bagged for murder. The #1 drug dealer on the South Side has been arrested and charged with a murder that took place 5 years ago, police announced. Highsmith, 38, was pulled over Friday night, right as he was sliding into his brother's auto shop on Halstead in a 50K custom Corvette. They hit him with charges for the 1982 murder of Glenn Weller, a Cincinnati dude who pulled up to Flukey's spot at 914 East 79th trying to trade a burner for some work. Problem was, that motel had a strict no-gun policy. Things got heated between Weller and Highsmith, and according to cops, Highsmith took out an automatic pistol, beat him over the head, then shot him dead. After that, Highsmith and another man allegedly chopped up Weller's body, stuffed him into 2 plastic bags, and dumped him in a nearby alley. Highsmith shook off those charges, but his rise to power started way before that. Back when he was a young gun, he made a name for himself by shooting a teenage Larry Hoover. Yeah, that Larry Hoover, outside their high school. Highsmith was riding with the Black Disciples at the time. A little bid for assault later, and he was in Flukey's camp as an enforcer. But by '84, he branched off, linking up with Bay and others. That's when things got real tense. They tried to take him out in '86, unleashing a whole storm of bullets on him and Bay, but both survived. 2 months later, Flukey wasn't so lucky. He got sent to the upper room. When the dust settled, Highsmith had locked down the South Side. By '92, the DEA was on his ass, and when they pressed him about slinging poison in his own backyard, his response was ice cold. "All I did was the demand." DEA Task Force Supervisor Richard Barrett put it bluntly. He couldn't have cared less. He was about one thing, money, and if you knew what was good for you, you stayed out of his way. Like Flukey, Highsmith had a thing for flash. After Dick Tracy hit theaters, he had a $3,500 bright yellow raincoat and matching hat custom made. His girl, Mary Sandifer, called him generous, but when asked about his business, I suggest you ask him that question. In the end, Highsmith took a plea on drug conspiracy charges tied to 47 keys of coke. He was running product out of 5 trap houses in Englewood, flipping it in $10 dime bags. When the DEA started zoning in on gang bosses, he was the first on their hit list. In '93, the feds locked him up. By 04, he was back outside. Then, in 2011, there he was at Baby's funeral, some 25 years after dodging Flukey's hit squad. A full-circle moment in a never-ending cycle. Bodyguards turning to assassins, hitmen flipping into snitches, snitches turning into rapists, shooting victims becoming suspects, and kingpins ending up in coffins. But at the center of it all, not Flukey, the Chicago Police Department. One group of cops was stuffing their pockets with drug money while another crew was cutting dirty deals with informants like Daryl Moore, a serial snitch and rapist in hopes of bringing down the city's biggest dope boys. Flukey's own bodyguard, Earl Wilson, was a police informant at the same damn time he set his boss up for slaughter, a coincidence his handlers never explained. Maybe the crooked cops and the straight ones linked up for a little house cleaning. Who knows? And if someone does know, they ain't talking. For all the shady moves Chicago law enforcement pulled to take down the so-called drug kingpins, the city still ended up the #1 hub for wholesale dope shipments in the country, outpacing even LA. Shouldn't be a shock to anybody paying attention. In 2011, Judge Joan Lefkow sentenced former District 2 Police Commander John Burge to 4.5 years in the feds. Burge ran the Violent Crimes Division in the same district that housed Flukey's empire, and he had been accused since the 80s of torturing suspects during interrogations. When the police corruption scandal blew up, it took down Flukey, dirty cops, and a whole network of criminals. Judge Lefkow's words in court could have applied to the whole damn force. You denied any knowledge of torture. Unfortunately for you, the jury didn't believe you, and I must agree, I didn't either. How can one trust that justice will be served when the justice system has been so defiled? Chicago's streets were a battlefield, but the dirtiest game wasn't being played by